and welcome to Stitchinbeee's Create With Me. Today we are going to be making this lovely little box with our cross stitch mounted on the top. So if you're interested, stay tuned for the upcoming tutorial. Hi everyone, my name's Ellie and I'm Stitchinbeeee here on flosstube and also over on Instagram. Welcome to my channel. This is one of the spin-off videos of my other kind of series, Stitchinbeee's Create With Me. And today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to finish this lovely stitching onto this box top. So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to show you everything that you're going to need to finish this project. So I have got my piece of stitching here. This is a piece from Sophie crafts. She is on maternity leave at the moment, so I don't believe that you can actually buy her charts at the moment, but I bought that before she went on maternity leave. And yes, it's just an initial, as you can see there with the bees and the lovely flowers. I have actually changed all the colours, or most of the colours, to kind of suit the theme that I'm going for, as I'm going to be making this as a bridesmaid gift. So these are the kind of wedding colours that I'm choosing, so that's why it's a little bit different to the original. So there's the front and the back. So that's my finished piece of stitching. You will also need a box to finish your stitching on. So this box I actually bought from a craft shop in London, like one of those kind of DIY craft shops, but you can often get boxes and things like this from the Works and the Range if you're in the UK, or probably Michael's and Hobby Lobby in the US. So this is my box. It was just plain wood, but I have painted it. And I used this paint from B&Q. It's just one of the colour testers, so that was the cheapest way of buying, rather than buying a full tin of it. And it's in this colour here. I can't actually say that, but there you go, you can see the label there. So I bought 2 pots of this because I did 4 different boxes, so I've still got some left over, so that was fine. And then to kind of give it that more completed, professional finishy kind of look, I bought some varnish just off of Amazon and put that over the top. So that just makes it nice and shiny, and you can get varnish from most of the craft shops. And then I changed the hinges to these lovely gold hinges, which again I purchased from eBay, I believe. And I think they're called the butterfly hinge. And then it's just got a magnet at the front. And then inside I have just used some gold vinyl for the top and the bottom and painted all of the inside and the lid and everything as well, and the bottom. So that's my completed box. So I'm not going to show you how to paint the box, I'm sure you can manage to do that, but this is the stage you're going to be at once you've got your box all painted. So that's that. You're also going to need some quilter's clips. You're going to need a needle for lacing. You're going to need some lacing thread. So I use this DMC kind of cotton, crochet cotton thread, which I find is really good for lacing. You're going to need a tape measure. You're going to need some lightweight kind of wadding or batting. This is the one that I use, and I'll link everything down below. So I find this one really good. You'll need some mountboard, and you'll need some interfacing, which you can just get from most craft shops. And then to finish off the box completely, you'll need some glue. So I've just got Aleene's tacky glue, which I use for everything because it's so good. And then some chenille trim in a colour of your choosing. I've gone for purple. So that's all the supplies you're going to need. First of all, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about the stitching. As I say, I've changed the colours up here, but this lovely gold thread is a DMC Diamant Grande, if you can see it there. It's a really lovely metallic, and I don't often say that about metallic thread, but it's obviously quite thick, so you only need to use 1 strand, and it's really nice coverage, I would say. So that's a gold thread that I've used. So first things first, we are going to wash and iron our cross stitch piece. I've actually already done that with mine, but I would definitely recommend doing that, especially if you're you know, I always wash my pieces unless it's a hand-dyed fabric. Obviously, if it is specialty threads, you know, over dyes and things that you've used, I wouldn't advise washing it because it's not colour fast. But this is just Got navy fabric, 28 count, so I can easily wash that. And as I say, it's all DMC threads. So I just wash it in the sink with kind of lukewarm water and use either a bit of hand soap or a bit of fairy liquid. Just give it a little wash and then a rinse, then put it onto a towel, and then I just iron it whilst it's wet, and that really gets all the creases out, and yeah, helps with the finishing process. So my piece is all ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do, I've kind of prepared everything beforehand, but I'm just going to tell you the steps. So when you're actually finishing your box top, obviously the boxes are all going to be different sizes depending on what box you have got. So I would always just get your tape measure. And I always do things in inches for some reason, because I think I've watched a lot of American tutorials and that's what I tend to use now. So I would always just measure the diameter of the box. So mine's about 4.5 inches, or so you can turn that round. And that's just about 11.5-ish centimetres. So that's the diameter of circle that we're going to need when we're cutting everything out. So I always like to get my bits and bobs prepared beforehand. So I have cheated a little bit and used my Cricut machine to cut out all these circles because it's so much faster and much more kind of smoother as well, and easier to cut out on that than using scissors. But obviously if you don't have that, you can use scissors as normal. So I have cut out a piece of interfacing that is exactly that diameter, although I have left a kind of very small margin around the edge. So I think I did this circle, so I say it was like 11.5 was the diameter I measured. I think I did this at 11 centimetres, so I've just left kind of 0.5 centimetres or 1/4 of an inch of a border around the edge, because we're going to put the chenille trim on as well. So this circle for this box is 11 centimetres in diameter. So I've cut this out, as I say, with the Cricut machine, but you can just cut a circle. You can use a compass and measure out 11 centimetres on the ruler, and then pop the compass in the middle, obviously draw around and then cut. So then you want to do the same thing with your wadding. So I bought this from Thimbles and Fabric and Crafts. I get it at the craft fairs in at Glasgow, and they're in Birmingham as well. I always pick it up when I go to that craft show. Really quite inexpensive, the amount that you get. I think it was about £7 or something like that. I think you can order online, but it is quite a substantial amount for postage, unfortunately. So again, I've done the same thing and measured out my circle, 11 centimetres diameter. And then repeating the process again with my mountboard. I have measured out my 11 centimetres and I have cut that out here. So then what I did was glue, well, I ironed this wadding actually just to kind of smooth out the creases, but you don't have to do that. And I used my Aleene's tacky glue to glue the wadding to the mountboard. So as you can see, that's all nice and rigid, just gives a bit more support to the piece. And I think just kind of, I don't know, makes it more of a professional looking finish, because it just kind of gives it a bit more height and depth really. So that's all ready to go. And as I say, we've got our interfacing too. So next step, once you've got all those things cut out, so your interfacing, your mountboard and your wadding, you're just going to take your interfacing piece and go over to the ironing board. So make sure with interfacing, you've got two sides. You've got a bobbly side and you've got a smooth side. So the bobbly side is the bit with the glue on it, so that's going to go face down onto the piece, and the smooth side is going to be on the back. And of course you want your stitching to be flipped over. So you are going to iron on your interfacing onto the back of the stitch piece, just like so. So in the process of actually ironing it on, you obviously want to try and centralize it as much as possible, but it doesn't matter if it's not absolutely perfect. And in terms of ironing it on, you're just going to press, press, press. You're not going to iron it like you would a piece of normal fabric. and it's just gently to adhere it onto the fabric but not kind of crinkling it as you go. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. So now I'm back with my interfacing iron-on. As you can see, it doesn't move up at the edges, it's nice and secure and flat, and that's that step done. Next I'm going to turn my piece back over, and this is the bit where you have to be quite careful. I'm going to get my lovely fabric scissors. These are Guggenheim scissors, which I highly recommend. They cut beautifully and are very, very nice to hold. They're proper kind of dressmaker's scissors. So really what we're going to do next is cut off the excess fabric around the piece. And you want to just do this carefully because obviously you can't add fabric back on when you have cut it off. So I'm going to make a very broad cut first, and just generally going to cut. Doesn't have to be perfect by any means, it's just getting off the excess fabric. I'm just going to cut along this edge just to get rid of any fraying, but I'm not going to actually cut any off here because I think that's probably close enough. Move those out of the way. So there we've got a kind of oval shape, not particularly circular, so I'm going to cut a little bit more off this side here. So you want to do this really cautiously. I'll just take a little more off this part here. So you're really not looking for perfection at this point, as this is just to reduce the bulk really when we actually lace it, but we're not finishing it in this shape at all, so don't worry about if your cutting's not very neat. So I think I'm happy enough with that. Got a decent border around the edge, and we've cut off the corners, so we've got a general kind of circular shape. So now what we're going to do is get our mountboard, which is our wadding is glued onto, and we're just going to pop it behind our stitch piece and just kind of roughly see. Sometimes where the interfacing was is a good guide of where to put it, although mine's a bit too far over, so I'm just going to move it back. And this part is all about trial and error really, to try and get enough of a border all around the edge. I should have said as well before I started stitching this piece, I obviously checked the diameter of the pattern to check that it was able to fit on this box. And if you want to see a little bit more about how you determine what fabric to use based on the size of the box or the wooden thing that you're mounting the piece onto, you can check out my other tutorials where I've done an Easter egg, because that's where I tell you about how I decide if the pattern's going to fit and those kind of things. But yes, make sure your stitching is definitely going to fit the box before you embark on doing this. I should have said that at the beginning. So yeah, this is just a bit of trial and error really here. You're just kind of thinking where you want to put the piece. You obviously don't want, you want a little bit of a border around the edge, but you want to try and keep it nice and equal. So as you can see there, I've got way too much at the bottom. So I'm just going to keep fiddling around with this until I get it in the right place. Once you think you're happy with the position, you're just going to get your quilter's clips, and I always do top and bottom first. Just make sure you're kind of pulling it nice and taut, because it is going to be taut when you lace it, and then side to side. So there we have our piece all clipped, and again you can take another look at it, check that you're happy with the position of it. If you're not, obviously take the clips off and just start again. And this process can take quite a while to make sure you're definitely happy. Sometimes you can use the clips as a guide, so see that clip, the line is there and that reaches that part of the stitching. And it's the same with that one, so say they're pretty level. So yeah, just keep moving it around until you're happy with the final position, because once you've kind of committed to it, you can't really change it. So it's always best to spend the time making it nice and centered now, rather than regretting it later on when it's not quite straight. So once you're definitely happy with the position, you can set that aside for a moment, and you're going to get your quilting thread. You can use any kind of thread really. I guess you could use DMC if you really wanted to. I like this crochet cotton because it's just a little bit thicker and sturdier. But you could use anything you want really. And I'm just going to get a reasonable length. I probably cut quite a lot because I don't really like stopping and starting, but it is more prone to knot if you have too much. So it's trying to find that happy medium really. So just chop the end off there. So I'm just going to make a knot. I'm sure there's fancier ways of doing a knot than just wrapping it around your finger, but it's the way I've always done it. So you don't want the knot to be absolutely huge because you don't want it pulling through at the fabric, but just kind of done that 3 times, just a normal standard knot. And then I'll just thread my needle. The needle I'm using is one I've just had in my stash for ages. Just anything really with a big enough eye to pop the thread that you're using through. So obviously it will depend what needle you need, will be based on what thread you're using. I would say probably like a size 20 needle, or maybe a 22 or something like that. You know, something with a big enough eye obviously. So I'm just threading my needle, so we're all good to go. Next, I think the only thing I didn't mention that we needed was a pencil. And what we're going to do is turn our piece over and just kind of keep a mental note of where the top clips are and the bottom, so that's here and here. And what we're going to do is divide this roughly into 3. So I'm just going to draw a line where the middle top clip is. And then by eye, I'm just going to roughly divide that into 3. And it really doesn't have to be perfect, but this just helps with the lacing process. And if you want to, you can label it 1, 2, and 3. If you want to do it really perfectly, you could measure around the kind of circumference of the circle, and you could divide the circumference by 3, and then that would determine, with your tape measure, obviously how many centimetres or inches you needed between each marker. But I just find it quicker and easier just to do it by eye, and as I say, I always start at the top point. So that's that. So now we're ready to start lacing. So if you've never laced a circle, it's actually quite fun, and it creates a nice spiral at the back. So I'm just going to move my first quilter's clip just out the way because I'm going to start at mark number 1, and I'm just going to put my needle underneath the fabric here. And I'm not going to go right to the edge because you might be able to see the knot otherwise. So I'm just kind of coming probably 3/4 up, maybe even just down a little bit more than that. The main aim is that you're not right at the edge of the fabric, either this edge or the corner. Well, it's not really a corner, is it? But the edge of the mountboard here, because you don't want to see the knot and you also don't want this to fray. So I'm just going to pull my thread through. And then that secures the knot just there. So now, you guessed it, we're going to move on to number 2. So we're just going to turn it clockwise, and we're going to aim for point number 2, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Just pop our needle there. It doesn't have to be exact, but you're generally following the line for number 2. As I say, it can get quite knotted sometimes, so a lot of these knots do just fall out. are the ones you have to untangle a little bit. And obviously you could use kind of wax, you know, beeswax or sewn wax to obviously stop that from happening too. So we've done number 2, we're just going to turn it anti-clockwise again, and we're going to go to number 3. Exactly the same process. And you're kind of pulling it taut as you go, just to kind of obviously pull it all together. And as you see, we're going to go back to number 1, and we're always going to go to the right of the last thread that we used. So obviously we're going to the right of this one. And so in terms of spacing, you don't want it to be too far apart, because otherwise you're not going to get the same tension all the way around. But you also don't need to do it too close, because it will just take you so much longer, and obviously you'll use a lot more thread doing that. So I kind of leave that much in between. Yeah, maybe like ½ centimetre or something. So then I'm just going to pull that through. So you're just going to keep pulling the thread through. Make sure obviously it's always on the side of the clips, otherwise it will get caught at the front. And as you can see, we've done our first round and made a little triangle. So we're just going to repeat this process until we're finished, basically. So we're back to number 1. We're going to go to the right of where we were at number 2, and then to the right of where we were at number 3, and to the right of where we were at number 1. And we just keep going like that until we're finished. And every so often you just want to turn your piece over, the right way around, that's it, and just see that you're definitely happy, that it's obviously cinching in the way you want. Obviously you can undo it if you need to, and you can kind of gently tease the fabric to the way you want it to move to if it's just off by a very small margin. Okay, we'll just carry on. So now we'll come into the end of our lacing and just see how it looks on the box. I'm happy with that. So what we're going to do to finish this, so definitely happy that I've gone all the way around. So just going to pull the final bit nice and taut. As you can see, I've got our lovely spiral shape that we've created from just repeating that process again and again. And as you can see, when I cut it, this is the border that we had left. If you'd have cut too much off, then you really would have struggled to kind of lace it without it fraying at the edge. And likewise, if you'd have had too much fabric, then it can get quite bulky and you lose that nice shape, because obviously we want it to be as flat as it can be to pop it on the box. So this was kind of the perfect border amount. So we're just pulling it taut one more time, and then all I'm going to do to finish the thread is just weave under some of the fabric next to where I've finished, and I'm just going to pull the needle and pull the thread through. But I'm not going to pull it all the way through. I'm just going to wait until we get to the end there, and you see it's just a little loop. So I'm just going to pop my needle through that loop and just pull it taut, and that just creates a little knot. And then I'm going to repeat the process again, just next to it. And then I'm just going to pop it through the loop twice this time. Just forms a little knot. And then to finally finish it, I just weave through fabric one more time and just pull it taut, and then we can just snip it off. And this would be the same if you run out of thread halfway through. You would just stop it like that, cut off your end there, and then just start a new piece of thread with the knot like we did before, and just start exactly where the knot was, or you know, that kind of same area is where you restart to continue working around. So I'm just going to use my scissors to chop the end of that off. You can cut it quite close to the work because it's nice and secure. So now we're finished with that. You can see we've got our lovely laced piece. Obviously you're not going to see that side, this is the main side that you're going to see. So yeah, happy that that is nice and level and is as kind of centralised as it can be. So then again, we're just going to get our box. With this box, it's obviously quite clear where the back is because we've got this clasp at the back. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of where that is, and we want it to be as centred as possible. So that's how our box is going to look. So now what we're going to do, as you can guess, probably, we're going to use our tacky glue, or I guess you could use a hot glue gun, any kind of glue that's nice and durable, because obviously it's putting card and fabric onto wood, so you want something a bit sturdy. My glue is kind of nearly at the end, so I'm going to use a paintbrush to spread my glue onto the back, although you could just squirt it on in or use your finger or something. It's totally up to you, but I really love this tacky glue. I buy this from 123 Stitch. It comes from America. It's about, I think, $2.50 or something, so only a couple of pounds, and I just do it whenever I do a 123 Stitch order, and I really love it, so I highly recommend that. But I'm sure many other glues would work as well. So I'm just going to get my paintbrush and we'll glue that onto the box. So now I've got my paintbrush, and I would recommend just using these paintbrushes for glue, because as soon as you use them it does kind of ruin them a little bit. So I always have separate paintbrushes for actual painting and gluing. Just a bit of kitchen roll there to get off any excess. So I'm just going to take the lid off my tacky glue and put my box to one side for a moment. I'm just going to pop this face down, and as you guessed, I'm just very generously really popping some glue, starting in the middle. Make sure I'm covering all the fabric as well as the lacing thread. You just don't want to put too much right at the edge because it might spill through. Oops, she says putting it right there. Hold it a little bit closer. So yeah, you don't need loads. I'm just going to wipe that off the edge so you can't see it too much. But the main thing is you don't want it spilling too much onto the box, so just keep popping the glue on. And you want maybe just a little dab at the edge, but not a huge amount. So that's all good to go. Pop that back on my kitchen roll, and then this is the most important bit, to make sure you get it central. So it's the same, checking where that clasp is at the back, making sure I've got my stitch in the right way round. I'm not going to press anything down yet. I know there's going to be a little border around the edge. Just trying to make sure that's got an even border around the edge. Pick it up and just see. Let's see, that's okay. Happy that it's central. And then once you're happy with the position, you can just make sure you haven't got glue on your hands. just gently press stitch piece into place. As I say, at all costs you want to try and avoid getting any glue on the actual front of the stitching. Okay, so to allow this to dry as flat and as kind of smooth as possible, I'll get a piece of kitchen roll and pop that down on the table, turn the box over and then put a heavy book on the bottom and leave it for about 15 minutes, and that ensures that it just makes it nice and flush to the box, or as much as it can be. So that's that bit done. So now we're back after leaving this to dry for about 15 minutes, and the final step is to pop on the chenille trim. So I have bought this chenille trim, I'll show you the little card here, from Create Nostalgia. I bought this online, and I think it was about 60 to 65 pence for 5 meters of trim, and it's absolutely fantastic. I've got loads of different colours and I just love it. So it's a 3mm wide chenille trim and 5 meters, 100% polyester in the colour purple. So here we have it. So all I'm going to do is find the end. I always start from the bottom when I'm using chenille trim, just so you can hide the join a little bit easier. And what I'm going to do is that I'm not going to start from the very end of the chenille trim. I'm going to leave maybe about a centimetre or an inch, maybe about an inch of length at the end, because we're going to be able to make a little tail which will make it more seamless when we finish it. So I'm just going to see how that looks, and I've tested this on all my other boxes before, so we're definitely happy with the colour combination, and the idea is it's just going to run nicely around the edge. So what you're going to do is get your glue out again, but I'm going to use a smaller paintbrush this time, just to make it a little bit easier. And all you're going to do is dab a very small amount of glue onto the actual fabric itself. So I'll just show you here, and as I say, I'll try and start kind of symmetrically at the bottom, so in between here, and you're literally just going to dab glue around the very, very edge, not on top where the fabric is that is visible. You're just doing very much the edge around here. So that's what we're going to do. So I'll get my paintbrush. You want to just take your time with this, do it nice and slow, you don't want to rush, and be mindful of where you're putting the glue. So just dabbing it, as you see, very small amounts, just along the edge, and I do half at a time. So I'm just going to keep dabbing my glue until I get to the top centre. So keep going around. So now we've reached the top around the other side. I'll just put my brush down. So make sure you haven't got too much glue on your fingers. Let's say leave about an inch tail. And all you're going to do is very gently just coax that chenille trim to adhere to the glue. You don't want too much glue, because as I say, it can go onto the fabric and you'll be able to see a little residue, but you also don't want to have too little, because obviously it won't stick otherwise. And I really am just coaxing it, I'm hardly pressing it at all, because I just want it to sit nice flush to the edge, but still have a bit of bounce and fluffiness to it. If you press it down too much, then you might get some too much glue on the chenille trim and it might look a little bit squished. So I'm just gently coaxing it round, making sure it's nice and level until we get to the top part there. Just pushing it up from the bottom as well, just to make sure I get it in the right position. So that's half of the box done, and I'm just going to repeat the process around the other way. As you approach the end, you want to go right up to where that join is and pop a little dab just on that portion. I'm just going to get rid of that glue there. Okay, and then we're just going to continue to do the same, just coaxing the trim onto the box. A little bit on the fabric there, just wipe that off as quickly as possible. And then the main thing is when you're finishing it off, is that you want this to have the same bounce as well. Just try and keep it seamless as possible. And you're not going to cut right where the join is. You're going to again leave a little tail, get rid of the excess. So here we have a little tail at the end, and I might just put another tiny little dab of glue just where they cross. And you want to kind of almost overlap them a little bit. And then I'm going to leave this to dry for probably another 10 minutes or so. Leave the tail as it is, and then once it's dry we can snip the ends off. Right, so now the ends of the chenille trim have had time to dry, and I'm just going to trim the ends off. It's important you use really sharp scissors for this and cut them really close, because otherwise it can get a bit frustrating if you have like a little bit of a tail left that you just then can't cut off. So I'm going to get my trusty scissors. These ones are really nice and sharp, and I'm just going to cut right close to the chenille trim there, and then the same on the bottom. There we go. Now sometimes you might need to just shave the edge off one of them. I'm just going to trim that just like so. And what I often do is just pop a tiny blob of glue just on the end there, and then I'm just going to use my fingers to flatten that down and just spread the glue over those areas. So there we have it. That is our finished box top. So I've made 4 of these boxes, 1 for each of my bridesmaids. And to complete the box, I'm just going to put some gold tissue paper inside. And then I've got this little message that I wrote. So a handmade box for your little treasures, special memories to keep forever and ever. So that's going to sit in the box as well. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you learned something from it. Feel free to ask me if you've got any questions. Hopefully I didn't go through it too quickly. If you want any help or advice at all of how to make sure the actual piece will fit on the box, then just let me know. And as I say, there's other tutorials that I have done that kind of talk through that process too. So thank you so much for watching. Take care, happy stitching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!